hand over your eyes. I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
And now over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
And now over your heart, and just extend your arms out. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with is that you are whole, perfect, and complete at your essence, just as you are right now. You're whole, perfect, and complete at your essence, period. No exceptions. And I know for some of us, it's hard to hear that because it just feels like, ooh, that just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel true. But it is true. No matter what you've done, no matter, if you spent 20 years in prison, you are whole, perfect, and complete at your essence. If you had an affair with your best friend's mate, you are whole, perfect, and complete at your essence right now. If you've had your house repossessed 3 times, you are whole, perfect, and complete at your essence right now. If sometime you've tried to run a scam on Social Security or I know. We talk real stuff in this church, see? We talk real stuff in this church. No matter what you've tried to do, at your essence, you are whole, perfect, and complete. No exceptions. No exceptions. Well, maybe, Reverend Georgia, maybe, but what about my experience? I might be at my essence, but what about my experience? I don't feel very whole, perfect, and complete. And those things you just mentioned, having affairs and all that stuff, that doesn't measure my definition of being whole, perfect, and complete. What about Hitler? What about the Saranov brothers? What about Bahram? What about the people who just bombed in Egypt? What about that? What about those people? There are no exceptions. They are whole, perfect, and complete. Everybody is at their essence. See, the problem is people who do things like that, they're not feeling it. They're not seeing their that they're whole, perfect, and complete. They're not knowing that they're whole, perfect, and complete. And sometimes, and maybe oftentimes, we in this room have that same experience of not seeing and not feeling our being whole, perfect, and complete. And probably, my guess is that somewhere deep inside those people and somewhere deep inside us, when we're being bullies, because that's what we're talking about here, is being bullies, when we're doing those things that are less than our highest self, when we're doing those things that are less than, we're not feeling it either. We just can't feel it. We're trying to exert power over somebody else because we don't feel worthy. And we've all done that. We've all bullied at sometimes. We've tried to exert our power over somebody else to try and make ourselves feel better. But here's the thing. We are all whole, perfect, and complete spiritual beings and human beings, but not doings. We have imperfections in our doings, but not in our beings. And that's what I want to talk about today. See, we're here with learner's permit, really, on the planet. We're people with a learner's permit. We don't have our license yet. And so we're still working at it. But we might make mistakes in this world, but we are not a mistake. And if we can get that, if we could just get that, and we all say, oh yeah, I know that. No, we don't know it. We know about it, but we don't know it. So everybody say that with me. I make mistakes, but I am not a mistake. Say it again. I make mistakes, but I am not a mistake. We're going to, and when we have these mistakes that become patterns of mistakes, that's when we call them imperfections in our lives. Mistakes that become patterns. We repeat them enough that now they're just part of what we do. Those are called the imperfections, and that's what we're going to look at for this next series, this 4-week series. And I'm working with a book called The Gifts of Imperfection Let go of who you think you're supposed to be and embrace who you are. Your guide to a wholehearted life. Very long title, but it's a beautiful title. The Gifts of Imperfection. Let go of who you think you're supposed to be and embrace who you are. A guide to a wholehearted life. In other words, a guide to a closer walk with God. That's what this book is. It's a guide, a practical guide. It has, and the God I'm talking about is the God that is within you. That God that, oh, you just feel good because you're at your highest self. You're operating at your highest self. Now she has her name is Dr. Brené Brown. And she has 10 practical guideposts that we're going to go over in the next 4 weeks. So I hope you will make a commitment to come every Sunday for the next 4 weeks so you don't miss out on this. It's a powerful, powerful teaching that she's come up with. You know, today I'm just going to spend time on getting us on the same page with the foundational underpinnings of this teaching. And the first foundational underpinning is that we must get comfortable with our vulnerability. We've got to get comfortable with our own vulnerability. We have to begin to share what she calls our shame stories. Our shame stories. You know, here's the thing about shame. Shame hates it when we tell our story. It takes the energy out of it. Shame it just can't stand to have the light of day on it. It can't survive sharing. It loves secrecy. The most dangerous thing that we can do after we have a shame experience is run away from it and hide from it. Because when shame is hidden, it metastasizes. It grows. Now, this isn't new. Those of you who are in recovery, you will recognize this as step 5 in recovery. But it's important that we begin to dig as deep as we can into this teaching. Because when we have our shame story hidden and we're running away from it, what happens is we become convinced we are not whole, perfect, and complete. We become convinced that we are not lovable, we're unworthy of being loved and of belonging. Here's what she says. The greatest challenge for most of us is believing that we are worthy right now, this minute. Worthiness does not have prerequisites. So many of us knowingly created, unknowingly allowed, or have been handed down a long list of unworthy prerequisites. I'll be worthy when I lose 20 pounds. I'll be worthy if I can get pregnant. I'll be worthy if I get and stay sober. I'll be worthy if everyone thinks I'm a good parent. I'll be worthy when I can make a living selling my art. I'll be worthy if I can hold my marriage together. I'll be worthy if I can make partner. I'll be worthy when my parents finally approve. I'll be worthy if he calls back and asks me out. I'll be worthy when I can do it all and look like it's easy as pie. See, we are biologically, emotionally, physically, and spiritually wired to be loved and to belong. We're emotionally, physically, spiritually wired to be loved and to belong. And if we feel unworthy, it's very difficult for us to do. So here's what she teaches. She says, your worthiness is not found in your distant past. Your worthiness is found within your story, within your shame story right now. Being loved and belonging does not require us to change. It requires us to be who we are. That's what's required. See, most of us, we interchange these terms fitting in and belonging, but they're not the same at all. All of us in this room know how to fit in. When we want to fit in, we assess the situation and we dress how we want it, how it would fit in. We talk how it would fit in. We find the person in the room that we need to appease and to appeal to fit in. But the truth is, we're not fitting in at all. what we're doing right then is bringing an inauthentic self to a party. We might be tolerated. We probably will be tolerated. We probably will be accepted, but we won't fit in. See, you can only fit in if you bring your authentic self to the table, and then people want you there. See, we all know this, because when you first start dating somebody, you don't start off with your shame stories. Oh, you know. You put your best foot out there. But eventually, your stuff's going to come out. And if they stick around, you know you're loved. You know you belong. If they stick around after you share that. See, being our authentic self is probably the basis of this book. And we're going to talk more about how to do that easily and with grace in the next 4 weeks. But right now, I want to just talk about this notion that there are gifts of your imperfection. There are gifts of your imperfection. And the gift is this. It is a closer walk with God. You will have a closer walk with your highest self. You will have a closer walk with that part of you that is divine, and you will know it in your life. Specifically, we're going to talk about the gifts of God called courage, called connection, and called compassion. So today we're going to just start this morning. We're going to talk about all three this morning. I'm going to start with courage. I'm not talking about the kind of courage that means you run in when a bank robbery is in progress and you stop the bank robbery. That's not it. Or you walk the Grand Canyon on a tightrope. Not that kind of courage. I'm talking about the kind of courage it takes to stand up and say, I have made mistakes. I have done stuff. And I'm still whole, perfect, and complete. You know, I want to read with you. One of the reasons I like this book is I like to learn through storytelling. It's just part of, I guess I must like to learn through other people's sadness and mistakes and stuff. So she has lots of stories, her own stories in here, and also her client stories. I'm sure she has their permission, but let me read you this. This is a story that talks about courage here. She went to an elementary school, and she had done some research. She's a researchist, and she had done some research on what she calls wholehearted parenting. And somebody must have read about her and decided they would bring her to the elementary school, and they did, to do a talk. So here she is. I'm sitting in the front row when the principal introduced me. This is always a very awkward experience for me. Someone is running through a list of my accomplishments while I'm secretly trying to stave off vomiting and taking myself out of the running. Well, this introduction was beyond anything I had experienced. The principal was saying things like, "You might not like what you're going to hear tonight, but you need to listen for the sake of our children. Dr. Brown is here to transform our school and our lives. She's going to set us straight whether we like it or not." She was talking in this loud, aggressive voice that made her seem downright pissed off. I felt like I was being introduced for the WWE Wrestling Mania. All we needed were jock jams and a few strobe lights. In hindsight, I should have walked up to the podium and said, "I'm feeling very uncomfortable. I'm excited to be here, but I'm certainly not here to set anyone straight. I also don't want you to think I'm trying to transform your school in about an hour." What's going on? But I didn't. I just started talking in my researcher, I'm also a struggling parent way. Well, the die had been cast. These parents were not receptive. Instead, I felt row after row of people glaring at me. I started talking louder and finally got animated. I quoted scary research statistic that would freak out any parent. I served up my authenticity for a big helping of, "You better listen to me or your kids are going to drop out of 3rd grade and take up hitchhiking, drugs, and running with scissors." The second the talk ended, I grabbed my stuff and ran walked to my car. I was pulling out of the parking lot, my face growing hotter. I felt small and my heart was racing. I tried to push back the instant replay of me acting crazy, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The shame storm was brewing. When the shame winds were whipping all around me, it's almost impossible to hold on to any perspective or recall anything good about myself. I went right to the bad self-talk of, God, I'm such an idiot. Why did I do that? And I bet there's not a person in this room who can't identify with that moment of, oh, God, why did I do that? And the shame just kind of washes over us when that happens. She was right. She would have been much better if she'd have just gone to the microphone and said what was in her heart instead of trying to be something that she wanted. Every time we're trying to be something that we're not in a situation like that, it's going to backfire. The root of the word courage is core, and that means heart. The original definition of the word courage was telling one's mind what's in their heart, telling from one's mind what's in their heart. That takes courage. It takes courage to be in a family and know in your gut something is not right in the family and not just ignore it and move on. It takes courage to be in an office situation and know something's not right and to stand up and say something is wrong here. Let's try and figure that out. That's the kind of courage that you can get as a gift from your imperfections in this book. Well, let's move on to compassion. Remember, it's courage, compassion, and connection. Compassion, the early definition of compassion is to suffer with. To suffer with. Well, who in their right mind wants to be compassionate if that's the definition, to suffer with? But in fact, as Pema Chodron says, in order to be truly compassionate, not phony compassionate. We've all had phony compassionate with somebody who's tried to do that. But authentic compassion means that we have to be comfortable walking toward our own fears and our own past. And when we get comfortable with that, that's when we can actually be compassionate. Compassion means to recognize our humanity with everybody. Recognize our shared humanity. I want to read you one last story that really talks about this kind of compassion that means we're connected to each other, and we've all done it. I recently saw another example of ordinary compassion and courage at my son Charlie's preschool. Parents were invited to attend a holiday music presentation put on by the kids. You know the scene. 25 children singing with 50-plus parents, grandparents, and siblings in the audience wielding 39 video cameras. The parents were holding up cameras in the air, randomly snapping pictures while they scrambled to make sure their kids knew that they were there and on time. In addition to all the commotion in the audience, one 3-year-old girl who was new to the class cried her way through the entire performance because she couldn't see her mom from the makeshift stage. As it turns out, her mother was stuck in traffic and missed the performance. By the time her mother arrived, I was kneeling by the classroom door, telling Charlie goodbye. From my low vantage point, I watched a girl's mother burst through the door and immediately start scanning the room to find her daughter. Just as I was getting ready to stand up and point her toward the back of the classroom where a teacher was holding her distraught daughter, another woman walked by, looked straight at this stressed-out mom, shook her head, and rolled her eyes. I know. I stood up, took a deep breath, and tried to reason with a part of me that wanted to chase after the better-than-you eye-rolling mom and kick her perfectly punctual ass. Just then, 2 more moms walked up to this now tearful mother and smiled. One of the mothers put her hand on top of the woman's shoulder and said, "We've all been there. I missed the last one. I wasn't just late, I completely forgot." I watched as the woman's face softened and she wiped away a tear. The second woman looked at her and said, "My son was the only one who wasn't wearing pajamas on PJ Day." He still tells me it's the most rotten day in his life. He will be okay. We're all in the same boat. By the time this mother made it back to the room where she was teaching, where the teacher was still comforting her daughter, she looked calm. Something, I'm sure, that came in handy when her daughter lunged for her from 6 feet away. The moms who stopped and shared their stories of imperfection and vulnerability were practicing compassion. They took the time to stop and say, "Here's my story. You're not alone." They didn't have to stop and share. They could have easily joined the perfect parent parade and marched right by. And these stories illustrate courage has a ripple effect. Every time we choose compassion, we make everyone around us a little better and the world a little braver. And our world could stand a little kinder and more compassion now. Amen. Amen. So let that be a call to action for us, a spiritual call to action. Every time we see somebody in the supermarket or in the laundromat or somewhere else who's totally stressed out, let's remember our own imperfections, our own vulnerabilities, and make connection, which brings me to the last one, which is connection. The real definition of connection is this. The energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they can derive sustenance and strength from a relationship. See, I think the real part of connection is in that first sentence, when we can actually, in our authentic self, feel seen, heard, and valued. When we're not trying to put on the dog, but we're presenting who we are, and we can feel seen, heard, and valued. That's connection in our life. And it's so important. See, what researchers tell us is the more connection, the less depression. More connection, less depression. It also affects our physical health. Remember, we're hardwired physically, spiritually, emotionally to be loved and to feel like we belong. There's a study out of University of Rochester who looked at 225 patients who had coronary bypass surgery in the years ranging from 87 to 90. Of the 124 people who survived for the next 15 years, 61% were married patients, while 30% were single. And those stats were for both unhappy and happy couples. For happy marriages, the 15-year survival rate shot up to 83%. Not all of us can be married, and I'm not suggesting that if you're not married that you are not having good connection. But I am saying this. Make sure you have a beloved in your life. Not necessarily a romantic beloved, but somebody you trust. Somebody who can see you and have you feel valued and heard. Whether it's a best friend or a family member, whoever it is. Connection is so important, and it's a gift. It's a gift of the imperfection of our life. See, our innate need for connection makes disconnection more dangerous. And for those of us, and I know there's a growing number, scientists tell us there's a growing number of people who think technology is actually an imposter connection. It's just because we're plugged in doesn't mean that we are feeling connected to people. See, emoticons aren't the same as a hug for us. See, being on Facebook is a great thing. It's fun. It's great. I hope you're all on CSA's Facebook. But it's not the same as being here on Sunday and seeing each other face to face. It's not the same as getting together with friends for a glass of wine and just shooting the breeze. Or Coke or whatever. Don't email me. Coke is good. Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola. True connection. Erase that from the tape if you don't mind. True connection also means that we have to let go of self-sufficiency. We have to let go of this idea. We are a John Wayne society, and it doesn't serve us. It does not serve us. We need one another. We need to reach out to one another. And when we reach out to one another, it begins that law of circulation that we talk about here, that law of reciprocity that we talk about here. When we reach out, other people can reach out too, to us. Many of us in this church today are oldest children. And oldest children seem to be the ones to handle all the family matters still. They're the people who give the advice. They're the people who settle the arguments. They're the people who lend the money. That's not a bad thing. What's not so good is if you don't put yourself out there for other people to do that for you. That if you think you're so self-sufficient that you don't need any help in this life. So I want to close this morning by just repeating, you are whole, perfect, and complete at your essence. At your essence. You may have some imperfections that you've attracted to yourself along the way, and there are gifts in those imperfections. We're going to look, I hope you'll come every Sunday. We're going to look for the next 4 weeks at these 10 guideposts that will enable us. Bring friends. We have more chairs in the back. We'll just put them all out here. We're going to look at these 10 guideposts that can really help us begin to understand at a deep level how important it is for us to embrace our shame stories, for us to feel okay about our imperfections and still know that we are whole, perfect, and complete. This book is in the bookstore. If you want to get it and follow along with us, that'd be great too. So let's take this message into prayer, knowing that there's only one power in the universe. It's the power of love. And that love just permeates everything if we'll just turn to it, if we'll just feel it, if we'll just acknowledge it, if we'll just recognize it, if we'll just look for it. That love is everywhere you go. In the scariest moments, love is there. In your most disappointed moments, love is there. Love is everywhere. I give thanks for that. Deep, deep thanks. I release this word into law, and together we say, and so it is.